So, Dan, it's good to see you.
Great to see you.
It feels like it's been a while. So your last album of fully original material was Trio.
Yeah.
Back in 2019. Since then, you've done O'Neill's and Live at the Floodgate. But this is the first studio album that you've done in a while.
Yeah. Where have I been?
Why did it take so long?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I did the Trio stuff, and that sort of took up a lot of creative energy, I think it's fair to say. And then I always thought, and then I did the live album at the beginning of 2020, and then of course lockdown happened.
Oh right, there was a pandemic.
Indeed, yeah. It was just in time for all that touring, which was great. And then I did the O'Neill's thing, which really was born out of lockdown, because during lockdown I wrote the book of banjo arrangements, and then a lot of people said, a lot of banjo players said, we've had a go at this, we really want to hear what it sounds like, and so I recorded the album. So that took you up to sort of 2022 or something, and then my daughter was born.
Right.
So that took up quite a bit of time as well. And one of the main things I think that changed is that during lockdown I ended up with a lot more banjo teaching, and that was quite deliberate anyway, because I knew I was going to have kids, so I knew I wanted to be at home a bit more. And it's, to be honest, it's pure and simple, that thing of not allowing enough time to actually be creative. So it's that thing where you fill your diary with teaching work, you do your gigs, you're driving everywhere, and so you fill your diary, and all of a sudden I got to January 2025 really, and thought, I've hardly written a thing in certainly songs anyway. I'd written quite a few tunes, but I hadn't written songs for ages. I had like a handful, really small handful. And I thought, this can't be right. This is not me at all. And I'm always determined every year my show is different. And also, not only do I want new material just for its own sake, but also the whole show, you always want to be a creative at the end of the day.
I really want to talk about songs, actually, because, you mentioned that those were a particular focus. So we'll get back to that. But does that mean it was quite a conscious effort, this album? You sat down and said, January 25, I'm going to make an album. It didn't happen by accident.
I wouldn't put it quite like that, because I think I did genuinely just think I want new material more than I want an album. Mm-hmm. But I think once I'd written that material, I was like, may as well do an album then. I've always had quite an interesting approach to songwriting, in that the way I tend to write is that stuff goes around my mind for months, and then the song just kind of tumbles out. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like I've been writing it in my head for months. Once I actually put pen to paper, it tends to happen pretty quickly if I've been thinking about it, and clearly I had, because all these songs just sort of came tumbling out, really.
One of the reasons I asked whether it was kind of mindful is because what's tumbled out, all kind of belongs in a similar pocket. O'Neill's obviously went back to your kind of almost first love, really, of Irish tunes and rigs and all that sort of stuff. This one is, it's very country, right? It's very bluegrass influenced, all of that stuff. Is that going back to like formative influences? How did that happen? Why is it a country album?
I've always thought, I've not been the easiest person to label, it's fair to say. And I think that Irish and American have always been the two dominant influences. So I think however much I've delved into the Indian thing and and a bit of jazz and all the rest of it, I think Irish and bluegrass have always stood out as hefty influences. But often with the bluegrass side, this has taken the form of a couple of songs an album. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think a couple of things happened really. The very few songs I did have that I'd written had a nod to that part of the world, which was nothing new. As I say, I have written songs in that vein before, but both of them sort of nodded in that direction. And then I didn't think to myself, okay, let's go with that then. I'll just write loads more American, because I try not to conceptualize what I write anyway. And actually, there's a few things I wrote that aren't on the album because they didn't go with the rest of the album. But I think I definitely sort of just ended up writing a few more American sounding things, and then I suppose I did run with it then and thought, well, okay, let's make this album a bit more with a nod in that direction, and I'll save some of the other material for later, so those songs will appear somewhere, but just not on this album. And I think also I've made a career out of making albums that no one has a clue what they are, so I thought for once I'd actually make an album that was a little easier to pinpoint. And not that it's a country album, and not that it's a bluegrass album. It's got a nod to bluegrass, Americana, country, all of that, more than it's got a nod to anything else. But I wouldn't want people to think it's that's all it is. I think, there's a couple of quite funky instrumentals, which has always been a thing of mine as well.
It's interesting, like, I agree, it's not just a country or bluegrass album. You've become a bit of a singer-songwriter as well on this record, so some of your best songs are on this. There's a clutch of really great songwriting, and some of them are even kind of almost topical, like there's ones that deal with the difficulties that high streets are having right now. There are ones about kind of, I don't want to make it sound too dreary, but there's one about adult social care, and the question.
I go for all the
you do.
all the trendy topics.
The question, I guess, would be, again, you're saying you're not doing it consciously, but you do seem to have gone through a hot streak of songwriting on this.
Thanks. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's felt that way.
Okay, so it has felt that way.
Yeah.
You'll talk a little bit about that then. What are the songs doing on this record? Because you're right, there are instrumentals, and we'll get to those. Yeah. But the songs on this album really speak to the listener, I think. So how do they work for you?
To be honest, my most successful songwriting has always been when I've written about stuff that matters to me in some way. I've never really written like overtly political protest type songs, really, for the most part, just because I'm not very good at it. And I think also, if you're a Billy Bragg, where that's what you do, then that's fine. But I don't think that's ever really been me. And actually, I would compare this album a little bit to Incidents and Accidents, which was probably my previously most successful album, where there's quite a few songs just born out of the people I've met whilst touring and things like that. And I suppose on this album, because I've done more work local to me in recent years. So one song is about a fella in a care home who I played to and discovered he was an unbelievable singer, even though he didn't speak anymore. So I wanted to write about that. The high street thing you mentioned, that's all about Stafford, where I grew up. And even though I live in Shrewsbury now, Stafford's still very important to me. So I think all those songs, because they're personal, I think that's why they strike a chord. I think songs that sound like they're contrived efforts of writing about something sound like they're contrived. And I remember I've certainly, that I was looking to avoid. I think I always want to write about things that actually I understand and that make sense to me, because then I think I've got something to say about it. I think, writing songs about, let's say, politics, where it's such a broad topic, and I think I have got things I could say about that, but equally I don't think I do that best in song form, if you like. Although what we should be fighting for, I suppose, is probably the nearest thing to a political protest song I've ever written.
It's an anthem.
Oh, well, I'll take that.
About the importance of performing,
the arts,
music.
But again, I can write about that because I understand it.
Yeah.
So that's
it
about
remains
me.
Personal.
Exactly.
Can't do it freely anymore, but it is what we should be fighting for.
And then within that kind of breadth, and I think contributing to it, you have a band now. So it's not just you on the banjo and guitar, right?
No.
Talk to me about the band.
The musicians, Yes, I mean, so the previous, I did the Dan Walsh band thing years and years ago, so an album called The Same But Different, which really was band, so that was I don't mean it was banned from production. I mean band as in there was bass, drums, it was a hefty sound. Yeah. Whereas this is really, it's a bluegrass lineup essentially. So I'm doing all the banjo and the guitar. And then Lucy Williams, who is a phenomenal double bassist in a great trio called the Jaywalkers. And then Niall Krieger, who's a terrific fiddle player from the States but lives over here, who I remembered well from my Newcastle University days. And he's in a great bluegrass band called The Often Heard. And then Nick Zupardi, who's my go-to musician, basically. He's played on almost anything I've recorded because he's great, on mandolin. And then Mark, the producer, and Kate Griffin do some backing vocals. But basically, it's like a bluegrass lineup. I suppose it's a little bit different in that I'll still be touring solo, but I think just for the record, I wanted that, again, because the material nodded in that direction, it seemed a natural fit to have like a kind of bluegrassy type lineup. And I suppose I should mention as well, I think one of the things that swung me in this direction as well was in 2023, I went to a festival and finally got to see Nickel Creek, who I grew up worshipping. And through a bizarre series of events, never got to see live. So the first time round, I missed them because they split up or they stopped touring the UK before I had a chance. And then when they reformed and toured the UK, I was in New Zealand. And then when they were back again, my daughter was born 2 months early. So all these things, so finally I got the chance to see them. And their music has always been a massive influence on me. And I think I do remember writing just one or two things after that gig just because they inspired me that much. And I think there is a definite, I mean, it's not a tribute act by any means, but there is a definite nod to Nickel Creek, I think, in terms of that framework of basically quite poppy, rocky, anthemic, you used the word, that, you know, I guess a nod to that, but within a kind of bluegrass framework. Whereas there are other songs on the album like Move Away, and some might say, although obviously its origins are very different, but both of those are very much like pretty straight down the line bluegrass. And Changing Tides, which is one instrumental, is very much down that road. Whereas there's other things like What We Should Be Fighting For, What She's Got, and stuff like that, which are, I think there's a definite Nickel Creek Union Station type influence.
Yeah, I agree. So the thing that sort of characterises Nickel Creek for me is a kind of formal inventiveness, right? So they're not, although they're with, you know, they proceed out of that kind of bluegrass tradition. They do very interesting things within it and beyond it. You know, they smash through all the walls.
To me, they're scarcely a bluegrass band.
I agree.
They're an acoustic trio with a foot in that.
Yeah, and
direction.
you do this on this record. So there's an instrumental called Clatterbug, and the banjo, when it starts, sounds like a kalimba. It sounds like a thumb piano. You know, these kind of bell-like tones. And then there's an instrumental called Acoustic Circus, which just kind of goes to town. Because obviously you're known for your banjo playing. Was there anything that you were trying to do on this album, kind of musically? So we've talked about the songwriting and the lyrical content, and then we've had the band. Was there anything that you wanted to achieve with your instruments, the banjo and the guitar, on this?
I mean, there was, but in a funny kind of way, that was less of a factor this time. Because I kind of feel like I've done that. A lot of my career has been that. That's been, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I think I've been quite difficult to classify. And I think that's partly because my whole thing has been clawhammer banjo. I'm doing lots of things with clawhammer banjo that are a bit untypical. Which, I mean, that wasn't particularly what I intended, but I think I've done a lot of albums where the clawhammer banjo nerd will kind of get the thing of the different techniques of doing things. But actually, this time I really wanted to write some really good songs and some really good tunes and not worry too much. So that's, you know, I hope there's plenty on the album for the banjo connoisseur, and things like the Acoustic Circus, where that funky banjo thing, which has been something I've done for years, really on and off, and January Waltz, which is very different kind of feel. So there is plenty of virtuoso picking on there, I hope. But equally, that's not the focus of the exercise in a way that maybe previous albums have been. I think actually this is about, I just wanted to write some really good songs and really good tunes, and not worry too much about whether I'm making a particular statement about what the banjo can do, because I sort of feel that I've done that a lot over the years. And even the O'Neills album was partly about that. It was partly about, my first love, as you said, was Irish Jigs and Reels. Although I think you said rigs, which is that a combination of the two?
It is. It's my own portmanteau.
It's great, yeah.
It certainly wasn't me misspeaking.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely. So I wanted an album of rigs, and because those are the tunes that I've always loved, I just wanted a straight ahead album of those tunes played clawhammer banjo. But equally, that in itself, I guess, could be construed as a statement, because clawhammer doesn't typically do that. And in the past, I've done the Indian thing where, again, people are like, wow, that's not very clawhammery. Whereas this time, I didn't really care about that all that much, to be honest. I just wanted to write some good material. And it will be what it will be.
Yeah, and I think you've really achieved that, actually. So I think you're absolutely right. There are moments of real sort of, virtuosity on the banjo and the guitar, actually. There's some great moments for both instruments. And yet, at the same time, they're bedded within the band, within the songs, within the instrumentals, and it becomes this complete thing. It's really good. But you mentioned that you're going to tour all this solo.
Yeah.
Right? So you've had really busy times recently. You've been recording with Darius Rucker and Ward Thomas. You've been touring with Folk Quartet, of course. But for this album, it's just going to be you in folk clubs and other venues. How do you find that? Like, talk to us a bit about the kind of Dan Walsh live experience.
I did contemplate, if I'm recording it with this kind of band sound, is it worth touring with the band? But I think I am that bit older now where, obviously I've got my 2 children now, a busy home life, and I think I'm less into touring in that kind of every night of the week kind of way. So I think it's easier for me to just go out and do what I do. And I think also the songs, for the most part, there's only one track I can think of, which is Acoustic Circus, which is really hard to create just solo. I hope that people who see my shows, they get a good bit of variety. They get to see the real me in that sense. In that there's lots of stories, as I say, behind the songs, as well as the songs themselves. A lot of foot tapping that definitely goes on as well. And yeah, I'm looking forward to playing this stuff more and more. Really.
Okay, so we've spoken a lot about your songwriting
Yeah.
and the ones that you've written on
Yeah.
this album, but there are ones that you haven't written.
Yeah.
Okay, so some people might be quite surprised by at least one of these choices.
Yeah.
So we've got, for example, we've got Some Might Say.
I'd say we will find a brighter day. Some might say we will find a brighter day. 'Cause I've been standing at the station in need of education in the rain.
How did this one come about? Because it's very topical right now.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. So how did it get into this? How did it sneak its way onto a bluegrass album?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I've always enjoyed a cover. So, I mean, it's quite obviously the You Can Call Me Al guitar cover is one I've done for years at gigs. And obviously Salisbury Hill recently has been a bit of a thing for UFQ. And I started out playing in pubs, playing loads of covers. So I've always quite enjoyed that. I've always quite enjoyed putting my own stamp on songs. The Some Might Say thing really came about because on my... so when you earlier I mentioned about my teaching, the other thing that came up was my Patreon page, which has lasted a lot longer than I thought it would, which is basically just doing mostly banjo lessons and tabs, which people pay for, but also I do these split screen cover versions of songs where I play lots of different instruments and harmonise with myself and that kind of thing. And I deliberately do songs that are not designed for the instruments I play. And I thought, and it's not a very fashionable thing to say amongst lots of people, but I actually love Oasis. Like as a kid, as a Britpop, 1995, I was 8 years old. It was like, I loved it. So I have an enormously soft spot for them anyway. And I did Some Might Say and thought, I'd rather like this. And around the same time, I did a bit of work playing in the Redwood Centre here in Shrewsbury, just little gigs in the sort of atrium bit where basically I could just play anything. And I thought I'd play it there, and people loved it. Yeah, people really loved it, and I thought, this is really cool. And I really liked it, the idea of doing it with the bluegrass band setup, because my version was already, that's the direction I'd gone in. And I was thinking to myself, is it daft to put it on the album? But I think it's really good. And I thought Mark, my producer, might object, because he'd be like, why are you doing a cover? This should be your songs. But I thought, do you know what? I'm going to record him a load of demos. I'm just not going to mention it. I'll just see if he picks up on it. And he didn't mention anything. He just said, I love the material. It's great. And I thought, aha, it's great. And then when I went to record, he just went, so, it's a bloody Oasis cover. And he said it hadn't clicked for ages. And I thought, well, that in itself proves that the version works, because it didn't even dawn on him that it literally took him so long to realise that was the song. And I really enjoy playing it live and not introducing it and just playing it. And you can see a few eyes go like this. So I thought, it's great, let's do it, because I love it. I genuinely love it. I love the version. I like the bluegrass feel. I love the harmonies on it. I had a very particular idea of the way it was going to go. So that's it really.
It works so well. It fits right in, and I agree. Like, you've made it into your own thing. It's still identifiably an Oasis song.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've stamped it in a way that it just slots into the album magically.
I stopped short of going, tell it to the man who cannot shine as well. I think that helped.
And we're all grateful for that.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
But it's not the only cover on the album, right?
No, there is one other. Yeah, considerably less well known probably in this country. So it's an Irish band called Picture House, who years and years ago supported the Saw Doctors, who my whole family were massive fan. Well, still are massive fan. Somebody Somewhere is the most fantastic song about. So Dave Brown, who wrote it, was busking in those days. He busked in Dublin basically full time, and this is about a lot of the homeless people that he knew around the same time. Which I didn't know that until years later. I loved the tagline "Somebody Knows My Name." I loved that as a message anyway. It didn't even dawn on me that it was about homeless people until I heard him do an interview a few years ago. But anyway, that put the song back in my mind, and I worked up a version of it, and it became a bit of a live favourite. And I posted it online, and they commented, Picture House, and said, thanks for doing the song and everything. And I thought, well, it fits really nicely again with the feel of the album, so it seemed a really natural fit.